Hello everyone, I am Dr. Sonal Jain from Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. In this series of forensic science lectures, today we will know about various tools and techniques which can be used in forensic psychology division for investigation. There are certain evidences which are found at the crime scene. Those can be categorized as physical evidences or the biological evidences. But sometimes there is some information which is left missing from the analysis of these evidences. In such cases, we have to look for various other techniques which can help us in providing any corroborating evidence. Now, what is corroborating evidence? An evidence which can help us in further examination or will provide us a lead which will lead to the further suspects or any other further information that is helpful in the investigation of that particular crime scene. So, in the forensic psychology divisions, we have various techniques which can be used to know or which can be used for extracting the information from various suspects or various victims or anyone who is hiding or eyewitnesses if they are hiding any information. The techniques can be named as the polygraph test, or in the common language we call it as the lie detector test, or the narco-analysis or the brain mapping. All these techniques or the information which we get from this can only be used as corroborative evidence and cannot be submitted as such in the court of law stating that these are true statements. Before going for the polygraphic test or the narco-analysis test or going for the brain mapping analysis, we have to take permission from the court of law suggesting like this number of suspects will go under this particular investigation, and we have to take permission from the suspect also. If the suspect denies that he is not willing to go for a lie detector test or for a narco analysis test, then the investigating officer or the court cannot force the person to go for such test. So, in the forensic psychology division, the first test is the polygraph test, or commonly known as the lie detector test. It is an ancient and paramount recognized lie indicator technology. It is a set of equipment that measures and registers various functional directories. It measures blood pressure, pulse, respiration, and the skin conductivity while the suspect is asked and answered a series of questions. So, this test is a misogyny if say that it will just catch the lie if we ask a person a question and this test will tell that this person is lying. It's not about that. We look for certain parameters. The suspect is present and we will put a handcuff around his arm which will tell us about the blood pressure of that person. Certain knobs are present near the chest which will tell us about the heart rate. Then there are knobs in the finger which will tell us about the skin conductivity. So, the heart rate, blood pressure and the respiratory and the pulse, all these are being measured, and the graph which we get out of it, the respiratory rate, the electrodermal activity, that means how much sweat on the fingertips has been found in the person, the blood pressure and the heart rate of the person, how much fluctuation is there, that we have to look for. So, in this test, the belief is that the deceptive answers will produce physiological changes or responses which can be distinguished from those related with non-deceptive responses. In current years, brain movement has also instigated to be measured in this site. So, whenever there is a person who has to go for a polygraph test or he has to go for this lie detector test, there is a series of questionnaire which is being formed. The question includes the questionnaire includes some questions which have deceptive answers and which has non-deceptive answers. For example, if a person is undergoing a polygraph test, the question which is being asked, what is your name, and that is a non-deceptive response question. So he can clearly say that my name is this. So the questionnaire should be a mix of the deceptive as well as non-deceptive responses, so that we can see a change when, if the question which is being asked about related to crime scene, or about related to victim, about the weapon, or what happened at the crime scene, a change will be observed in the whatever we are noticing, the heart rate of that person, the BP of that person, or the amount of sweat he is producing when such deceptive responsive answers are being expected from that person. So in lie detection circumstances, its usage is grounded on the evidence that dishonesty is escorted by the variation in the action dignified by the polygraph. A polygraph does not sense lies but only stimulate which is expected to accompany telling a lie. Whenever the responses can be seen that on this particular deceptive response question, non-deceptive response question, the heartbeat of the person has raised or he has produced sweating, then we have to look for such evidences or such noticing in that particular graph. But whatever information we are getting through the lie detector or through the polygraph test cannot be directly used as an evidence in the court of law. It is a corroboratory evidence, and there are certain persons who have a strong will and they can control their parameters, and sometimes it can be deceptive also. Another test apart from polygraph is brain mapping. The brain mapping test is done to interpret the behavior of the suspect and also corroborate the investigating officer's observation and suspect statement. It measures the changes in the electrical field potentials produced by the sum of the neuronal activity in the brain by means of electrodes placed on the surface of the skin covering the head and the face. So the person, there are certain parameters, or there are certain which can be put on his head and the face, and the neuronal activity can be measured using these. Whatever the investigating officer will notice the change in those brain mapping parameters when a certain set of questions are being asked from the suspect who is under observation. The changes which are there, they are directly related to the specific perceptual or cognitive events which are called the event related potentials. For in simple words, we can say it is based on finding that the brain generates a unique brain wave pattern when a person encounters a familiar stimulus. So in this, the process will start of the brain mapping. The persons, the suspect who is under question, his head will be covered, and then a series of questions will be asked, and we have to look for the brain change patterns in the graph. So if he is not aware of such questions, then the brain wave pattern will be same. But if a familiar stimulus is being generated or similar questions is being asked related to the event, related to the crime, then there will be a change in the brain wave. Supposedly we have asked the person normal questions, what's your name, where do you belong to, who is in your family, but suddenly if we ask what happened that day on this date, so if he is well aware that on this particular date I have committed this crime, that will lead to a different brainwave pattern because a familiar stimulus is being given to that person. This method in India is called as brain electrical activation profile test. It's also known as the P300 waves test. During this test, forensic experts apply unique technologies to find out if a suspect's brain recognizes things from the crime scene that an innocent suspect would have no knowledge of. So, if a suspect was there at the crime scene, the things will be asked from him which are related to that particular crime. So, we will ask the questions from that suspect related to that crime, and if he is well aware of that crime, he will the brain wave will respond accordingly. But if the suspect is innocent and he has no idea of that crime, then the brain wave will be different. So, the investigating officer should look for the difference in the brain wave graph to know whether it raised a stimulus inside the brain on asking the familiar questions from the suspects. Concisely, the expert says the brain fingerprinting test, as the brain mapping test, is also called matches information stored in the brain with information from the crime scene. Studies have shown that an innocent suspect's brain would not have stored or recorded certain information which an actual criminal brain would have stored. So, another test in the forensic psychology division is narcoanalysis test. It is also known as truth serum test because there are the drugs which we use in this test. There are certain drugs like seconal, hyoscine, sodium pentothal or sodium amytal and phenobarbital. Basically, these are the drugs which come under the category of barbiturates, and these are given to a person and he goes into a state of mind, and then the certain questions are being asked which may lead us to the further investigation if any investigative lead is present in such particular cases. So, the barbiturates, it is being held in the presence of various doctors because the drug might have a severe effect on any person. So, these drugs, they produce a state of semi-consciousness in the subject, and the reasoning facility of the individual becomes ineffective. So, the effect of the barbiturates on the person is that they works on the principle of inhibiting the thought filtration. Whenever we are in the conscious state, we are aware that what we have to speak and what we have to hide. But the drug effect on person's brain is such that he is not able to filter his thoughts. Whatever question will be asked without filtration in the semi-conscious state, he can answer. For example, a suspect in the conscious state, if we are asking question, do you know this person? Do you know what happened at the crime scene? Do you have any idea about it? But in the conscious state, we will hide. In the semi-conscious state, if the barbiturate is being injected into our body, our ability to hide or to filter, that procedure of the brain is being inhibited, and this information can be spilled out from the person. There are so many cases in which the narcoanalysis test was conducted by the investigating agency. It is used as a preventive forensic tool to apart the planned crime, busting the conspiracies, and it can prove to be a valuable technique to prevent the organized crime in the hand of competent team of expert. But we have to be very careful while presenting the corroboratory evidence produced or the statement produced from the narco analysis, because they could be misleading in many cases. So, the investigating officer or the forensic psychologist who is taking care of this case, who is investigating this case and who is making the report of narco analysis, should make the proper analysis of the results which is being acquired either from the polygraph test or from the brain mapping test or from the narco analysis or truth serum test. Now, after the whole analysis of all the evidences in the forensic psychology division, in the forensic ballistics, biology, chemistry and toxicology division, now the major information part is the reporting in forensics. Because all the procedures right from the crime scene, reaching at the crime scene, collecting the evidences from the crime scene, and in analyzing the evidences from the crime scene, taking them to the forensic lab, tools and techniques used for the various analysis. So finally, the report which has to be formed and which has to be presented in the court should be formed in a manner. Now, certain definitions which are being defined by the court of law. The report is a written report, is the documentation of work performed by an investigating team and forensic lab member, and is reflective of the quality of service being rendered by members of the forensic science lab to other entities in the lab and the criminal justice system. All efforts shall be made to ensure that crime scene reports are accurate, proper, neat, self-sufficient for courtroom testimony, and should be based upon a uniform format. The responsibility, the performance of any function relative to a crime scene or lab examination on behalf of any departmental or governmental agency requires the submission of a written report that is assigned the agency's case number. Crime scene investigators and lab in charges are personally responsible from the prompt preparation and submission of reports relative to incidents which they are being assigned. Whenever a report is being formed after all the analysis in the forensic science lab, the senior scientific officer or any higher officials, which could be the director, the additional director, they will approve all the reports which are being formed by the junior officers. The review and approval criteria will be based upon and should not be limited to the following standards. Firstly, the use of correct forms, whatever we are mentioning in the report, its legibility and spelling, that should be checked, the thoroughness and comprehensiveness of the report, the promptness, which says that whatever the senior scientific officer or the lab technician or the lab analyst is trying to explain, it should be prompted in the report. The absence of any deletions and corrections, conformation with the established format. There is a particular format in which the report has to be submitted in the law, and the report should be in exact format. The various symbols and abbreviations should be in accordance with standard and proper procedure. There are basically 5 keys for all the reports. Firstly, it should be objective and unbiased. Only whatever the report says should be the neutral presentation of the facts. Nothing should be said on the basis of that the lab technician or the forensic scientist believe this. Whatever is presented in the report should be clearly and objectively mentioned. It should be clearly and easily understood with no potential for misinterpretation. Everything which is mentioned in report should be clear and concise and to the point. Should be thorough. It includes all information needed to reach a decision. Major factor is the accuracy of the report. The content reflects the facts as gathered, and it should be professionally written and presented, which speaks to the credibility of the investigator. So, if we look at the various report formation in the forensic science, there are certain reports which are direct. For example, the reports of the fingerprint examination or the footprint examination, these are the direct reports. Let's suppose we have a fingerprint examination report, then the report will mention that whether the fingerprint is a match or not a match. The footprint is a match or not a match. But in certain cases, for example, the handwriting examination, the report could be little bit thorough and little bit lengthy, which will explain that why the forensic document examiner feels that this handwriting is a match or is not a match. So, depending upon what type of report formation and is from the which section of forensic division, the scientist can look for various the accuracy of the report, the presentation of the report, whether the writing of the report is professional or not, or whether it is to be presented in the court of law. It is the duty of the senior officers to go through the report first, and then it is further represented in the court of law. The objectivities say that whatever is mentioned in the report should use non-judgmental adjectives and does not draw conclusion of its own. It also should not contain any personal opinions about the character of subject or witness or propriety of conduct, etc. Organizing and presenting the info, which include all the evidences. Otherwise, the thoroughness of the report could be questioned. We should point out the conflicting evidence if they are present in the report. It should be present very clearly, and it should acknowledge if any conflict is present. All the evidences should be grouped whenever possible. Similar information which is coming from the multiple sources. So, if various reports or various things are pointing to a similar source, then they can be combined together. A report should be present very concisely and very thoroughly. If there is any complex evidence, for example, if multiple tests are being conducted for a single evidence, then an aggregate information or a table can be used to present that. The report forms should be in the letterhead of the laboratory from where the report is being originated. So, the components of report should include the title of the report, that this report belongs to the analysis of DNA evidence, analysis of the fingerprint examination, analysis of the drug which is being collected. It should mention the unique identification number which belongs to a particular lab, that is come from the forensic science lab of this particular area, the report date when it is being generated, the ID of the police case under which the case is being registered, the submission date, that when the case was being submitted to the forensic science lab, the case heading, what was all present in the case, who are the correspondents and who are the subjects, the place of the crime, the date of the crime, various investigating agencies which are being involved in this crime, and who was the investigating officer, how was the chain of custody being maintained, what all samples were being handled or being transported from the crime scene to the forensic science lab. All the items which were submitted, they should be mentioned in detail. All the evidences which were submitted, they should be mentioned in detail. And finally, the conclusion of the analysis done. The conclusions should be very accurate and should be unbiased and should be to the point. If there is a matching, it should be reported that this is a 100% match, the fingerprint matches with the person, and if it is a non-match, then it should be also mentioned that this is a non-match, the fingerprints of these two persons does not match. In the cases of any other evidence of analysis, if more evidence is being required and if conclusions cannot be drawn on the basis of availability of such evidences, then that should also be mentioned in the conclusions of analysis done, that due to the lack of certain evidences or due to the degradation of the evidences which are being found or which are being submitted in the forensic science lab, such analysis or such conclusions cannot be maintained or cannot be done. This should also be mentioned in the report. So, whenever any report form or instructions, a report is being formed which has to be present in the court, the procedures and protocols conducted should be mentioned with various photographic or video evidences. Whenever there is a report submission, the whole court or the whole jury was not present at the crime scene. It is the duty of the forensic analyst or the forensic technician who is present in the courtroom that he should bring the scene of crime for the jury. So the photographs which are present there or the videos are present there, that should be used to clearly explain the whole scene of crime to the jury and other members which are present there. Also, the report should be mentioned, include all the dates, time, places, victims, suspect, evidences and team members, etc. A correct report, a correct thorough report with accurate results will help us jury to to reach a conclusive result, and which will help us in a good decision forming, and also will these procedures and protocols which are conducted, they will help us in reaching or making jury a confirmed opinion about that particular case. Thank you.